Welcome once again to the Great Abyss, where we explore the deepest, darkest corners of cosmic horror. Today I want to talk about a book I recently read that completely shocked me, The Fisherman by John Langan. If you're not familiar with Langan, he's a writer who approaches horror differently. His stories don't rely on cheap scares or grotesque creatures. Instead, they tap into something much deeper: grief, loss, and the unsettling feeling that the world is far more vast and indifferent than we'd like to believe. And The Fisherman is the perfect example of that. I wanted to bring this book to the channel because it embodies everything we love about cosmic horror. It's not just about ancient monsters or incomprehensible forces. It's about how small and powerless we truly are when faced with something beyond our understanding. But what makes this novel stand out is how it seamlessly blends human tragedy with an eerie, slow-burning terror that stays with you long after you've finished reading. So, does this ambitious mix actually work, or does the book lose itself in its own structure? Today we're diving deep into The Fisherman to find out if it truly deserves its reputation as a modern horror classic. So, get comfortable, because whatever is lurking in Dutchman's Creek isn't just a story. It's something much, much worse. Let's begin. The story of The Fisherman begins in familiar, deeply human territory: loss and the inability to move on. Abe has been trapped in grief, hollowed out from the inside. His wife Marie died of cancer shortly after their wedding, and with her went any trace of a future he could have imagined. Now, every day is the same as the last: an endless repetition of work, tasteless meals, and sleepless nights. Time doesn't move forward, it simply stretches into an eternal present where absence is the only thing that feels real. In his attempt to find something to anchor him to reality, Abe discovers fishing, not because he loves it, nor because it brings him real satisfaction, but because it gives him a routine, a mechanical, simple act that fills the empty hours and allows him to escape the thoughts that torment him. This is where Dan comes in, a co-worker with whom he had never exchanged more than a few words, but who carries something Abe immediately recognizes: the weight of grief. Dan lost his wife and children in an accident, a tragedy that has stranded him in the same gray fog where Abe now drifts. Fishing becomes their shared refuge. They don't need to talk about what they've lost, because absence is already present in the silence they share. They are two men reduced to little more than shadows, searching in the water for something they themselves can't even define. Up to this point, the story might seem like a drama about grief and resilience, but The Fisherman was never a book about redemption. Because then, Dan mentions Dutchman's Creek, a stream that almost no one talks about, a place that doesn't appear on maps, a spot where fishing is different. At first, his suggestion seems harmless, just another place to try their luck, another secluded corner where they can continue their routine. But there's something in the way he brings it up, in the insistence with which he suggests it, that leaves an unsettling echo. Abe doesn't notice it at first, but the reader does. And this is where John Langan begins to reveal his true skill. There is no explicit horror in this first part, no creatures lurking in the shadows, no whispers in the night. But there is something worse, a growing sense that something isn't right. The horror in The Fisherman starts insidiously, not with a direct threat, but with an atmosphere that becomes increasingly oppressive. It's a discomfort that settles into the characters' gestures, in the pauses in their dialogue, in the way Dutchman's Creek becomes a presence of its own before they even set foot there. Abe and Dan finally head to Dutchman's Creek. What seemed like a simple stream turns into something more, much more. But before they can fully understand what they have stumbled upon, the novel takes an unexpected turn. This is when Howard appears, the owner of a local restaurant, a character who feels as though he's stepped straight out of a classic Gothic tale, like the innkeeper who warns travelers about the castle at the end of the road, or the old man who whispers of cursed ruins. Because Howard knows something, and he doesn't keep it to himself. Instead of continuing with Abe and Dan's story, the narrative pauses and plunges us into another tale, the history of Dutchman's Creek's past. This structural shift is, without a doubt, one of the most striking and divisive aspects of The Fisherman. Suddenly, what seemed like an intimate story about grief transforms into a story within a story. For nearly 200 pages, Langan transports us to another time, another context, another horror. And this is where Lovecraft's influence becomes undeniable. Howard's story takes us back to the 19th century when a mysterious man, one Dare Fisher, arrived in a small mountain community. No one knew where he came from or what he was really doing there. But with him, he brought something that did not belong in this world. Dutchman's Creek is not just a simple stream. It is a portal, a fissure in reality that connects to something far greater, older, and utterly beyond human comprehension. A place where the rules of life and death are not the same. And Der Fisher knew how to use it. With promises of knowledge and power, he lured in those desperate enough to listen. Those who followed him learned too late that what they believed to be a blessing was, in truth, a curse. Because the waters of Dutchman's Creek give, but they also take. And those who answer its call cease to be human. The true horror of the fisherman. This interlude is crucial to the book, not only because it expands the lore of the story, but because it completely reshapes how we perceive what is happening. Up until this point, the novel had immersed us in human sorrow, loss, grief, and the desperate need to find something to help us move forward. But now, it reveals what happens when that need to escape becomes too strong. Because Dutchman's Creek offers a kind of relief, but it is not the relief Abe and Dan are looking for. And when the story returns to them, we are no longer the same readers we were before. Now, we know what lurks in the water. Now we understand that they are walking straight into their doom, and there is no stopping it. By this point, the novel has made it clear. Dutchman's Creek is not just a stream. It is not merely a place with a dark history. It is not simply the setting of a warning that Abe and Dan have chosen to ignore. It is a fracture in reality, a point of contact between the world we know and something far older, vaster, and incomprehensible. And now, it is about to reveal its true face. Abe watches as Dan casts his line, and in that moment, he feels something break in the air. It is not a physical sound, but the undeniable sensation that they have crossed a threshold, that what was once just a lingering unease has become something real, something irreversible. At first, the fishing line remains still, suspended in the current with an eerie calm. Then, without warning, it pulls taut with an unnatural force. But whatever is tugging on it does not move like a fish struggling to break free, nor even like something alive in the conventional sense. There are no jerks, no resistance, only an overwhelming weight, a steady pull that does not seem to come from a single point. It feels as though the line is caught on something massive, something that is pulling them in rather than the other way around. Dan leans forward, gripping the rod with all his strength, and at that moment, the water changes. The water opens, and the impossible appears. It is not that the surface breaks with the emergence of something tangible. It is not a fish rising from the depths, nor a shadow shifting beneath the water. Instead, the current itself begins to distort, as if the very fabric of reality is unraveling at that spot. Light ceases to behave as it should. The reflections of the sky and trees vanish, leaving behind a liquid blackness that is not mere darkness. It is an absence of color, a void that absorbs vision rather than reflecting it. This is not the blackness of depth, but something else entirely, something that extends beyond the river, beyond the ground, beyond any comprehensible notion of space. And then the shapes emerge. They are not a single creature, nor even a singular entity. There are no recognizable tentacles, no distinct limbs. Instead, there are faces. Dozens of them. Perhaps hundreds. Fragments of people trapped within the black mass, shifting within the liquid as if suspended in time, their expressions frozen in desperation, in terror, or in the most absolute emptiness. Some have their eyes stretched wide open. Others have mouths agape in silent screams, their features warping and rearranging with each ripple of the water. Dan lets go of the rod, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Because among those distorted faces, among those figures trapped within the current, he sees his wife and children. And the worst part is that they see him too. It is not telepathy. It is not a whisper in the air. It is something Abe and Dan feel deep within their skulls, as if the stream itself is speaking directly into their minds, bypassing the need for sound. It is a voice without gender, without tone, a vibration that resonates in the most primitive part of the brain, where instinct meets pure terror. Come with us. It is not a command. It is not a threat. It is a promise. Dan takes a step forward, B watches him move without resistance, without fear, as if there is no doubt in his mind that this is what he is meant to do, as if the stream had been calling him from the moment his family died, as if this was the inevitable destination of his suffering. Abe tries to stop him, to grab him by the arm, but the moment he touches him, something horrific happens. The change is not immediate, but it is visible. His skin grows paler, more translucent, as if his flesh is losing its structure. His veins darken and begin to spread beneath the surface, moving erratically, as if something inside him is rearranging them. His mouth opens in a sigh, but his eyes show no pain, only acceptance. Abe tries to pull him back, but his arm no longer has the consistency of a human body. It is softer, more flexible, as if his flesh is slowly liquefying, dissolving into the humid atmosphere of the stream. The water rises to his ankles, and the moment the current touches his skin, the process accelerates. His legs stop supporting him, his muscles turn fluid, and his torso begins to slide into the black mass, as if it had never been solid to begin with. The last thing Abe sees before Dan disappears completely is his smile. It is not a smile of horror, nor of madness. It is the smile of someone who has finally found what they were looking for. Abe does not stay to see what happens next. He turns and runs, blindly crashing through the trees, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. But as he flees, something inside him knows that he has not truly escaped. Because the water of Dutchman's Creek is not just a portal. It is not simply a being that feeds on the souls of the dead. It is a consciousness unto itself, something that does not merely consume, but spreads and expands, something that does not stop at those who fall into its depths, but seeks more. And though Abe has physically escaped, something in his mind has been touched by the presence of the stream. Because when he closes his eyes, he cannot stop seeing Dan. He cannot stop seeing that smile floating in the darkness. And the worst part is that, deep down, he feels that the stream is still speaking to him, that it is still calling him, and that one day, when the memory of the horror has worn down enough, when the sound of water in the rain reminds him of what he left behind, he may not be able to resist coming back, because the stream does not forget those who have glimpsed its threshold, and sooner or later, all who have seen it return. Conclusion. The Fisherman is more than a horror novel. It is an exploration of grief, obsession, and the terrifying allure of the unknown. John Langan masterfully blends human tragedy with cosmic horror, showing us that the true terror does not lie in grotesque creatures or supernatural forces alone, but in the quiet, insidious pull of something beyond our understanding. Dutchman's Creek is not merely a haunted place. It is a presence, a force that lingers in the minds of those who encounter it. Its horror is not just in what it takes, but in what it leaves behind. The unshakable knowledge that some doors, once glimpsed, never truly close. Abe may have survived, but he has not escaped. His mind has been touched, his fate already set in motion. And through his story, the Fisherman leaves us with a chilling thought. What if the worst kind of horror isn't being consumed by the abyss, but knowing that one day, despite everything, you might walk into it willingly? Because some calls cannot be ignored, and some horrors never let go. If you enjoyed this dive into cosmic horror and want to explore more stories like this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. The abyss is deep, and there's always more waiting beneath the surface. See you in the next video.